franchise player to build around, and those 3 picks will help them get that franchise player on their roster. The Wizards have traded Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Ish Smith to Denver for Will Barton and Monte Morris. The most notable part of this trade is Ish Smith. He's, to me, one of the best backup point guards in the NBA. Has an underrated scoring ability and just goes with the flow of the game. But if he plays a game in Denver, he'll be playing for his 13th team in the NBA, which is a new record. In terms of KCP, he's a long athletic guard who's shown some scoring ability at times. I remember when he was on my Pistons, there were games where he'd go off for, 30 plus points, sometimes close to 40. But he's really mostly known for his defense. He's become more of a bench player at this point. And if Denver's relying on him to be a starting guy for them, they may be in some trouble. He's not going to be that third scoring option that they need outside of Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. On the other side of this, for the guys going to Washington, Will Barton has made a living as a slashing guard who can be useful as a third or fourth scoring option. Monte Morris is off to a better start in his career after kind of being an unheralded draft prospect. He's an above-average backup guard who can play both point guard and shooting guard, which makes him a combo guard. And he also is one of the better defenders as a guard in the league and should become one of the better backup point guards as his career progresses. The Detroit Pistons added Nerlens Noel and Alec Burks, along with cash in 2 future seconds from the New York Knicks. Been trying to find the return that New York is getting on that, and I haven't been able to. It is a salary dump for the Knicks, and initially I expected the Pistons to part ways with both Burks and Noel as just absorbing contract money. However, there are reports out there that say that the Pistons are interested in keeping both of them. Nerlens Noel is a former lottery pick who can be a solid backup player at this point in his career and excels as a defensive player. He's also going to a spot with Dwayne Casey as the head coach in that staff, who largely still together, I believe, from when they had Christian Wood, and Wood was able to revive his career and turn that into big money in Houston and Dallas after his time in Detroit. So maybe Noel can find something there. Burks is a veteran three-point shooting guard who's experienced in the league, can help Detroit's very young group of guards, aside from Corey Joseph. And the Pistons can also move on from both these guys after the season and still have a ton of cap room. They've also made that trade, like I mentioned before, with Jeremy Grant to Portland for a 2025 first-rounder and multiple seconds. That 2025 first-rounder turned into Jalen Duren and a few other things, I believe. For Portland, they get another star to pair with Damian Lillard. They've been looking for that scorer to kind of rebuild their franchise or add to their franchise rebuild alongside with featured star. And like I said, Detroit turned their return into a lot more with Duren, extremely high potential, athletic, strong player, and the youngest player in the draft, so a lot of room to grow. And so it seems to be a great fit both ways for those two. Tomorrow is the start of NBA free agency, so more moves have started to be made, including players and teams picking up and declining options for next season. John Wall opted into his $47.1 million option with the Houston Rockets last week. Since then, the parties have agreed to a buyout. I don't remember what the number is off the top of my head, but he is now expected to sign a deal with the Clippers after missing quite a bit of time with injuries. Kyrie Irving also picked up his player option with the Nets. It's a move partially due to a non-existent trade market after he made a list of teams available to the Nets that he would like them to consider trading him to if they're not able to work out a more stable contract. And if you're in the Nets, I don't know why you would want to make a stable deal with Kyrie Irving, because there's not really, stable is the wrong term for it. He's not the most stable player. He barely played last season due to his refusal to get the COVID vaccine. I'm not here to tell you what you should do, but in a league where you're supposed to be a star player and you're playing for a team that's in a city that requires it for sporting events and for the players to participate, and then not getting it and sitting out most of the season and running your own practices under the coach's nose, it is not behavior of a good teammate or a player that teams are going to want. And because of that, Kyrie is opting into his option with the Nets, trying to get a deal done, but also needing to show people that he can be a part of the team and kind of shed that reputation for being a self-centered player, although it's kind of set in stone at this point. And, the last season doesn't help his case at all when trying to convince these teams to want him, especially with that contract. James Harden of Philadelphia and Bradley Beal of Washington have both declined their options, but don't get too excited if you're someone who wants one of these guys on your team. It looks like they're probably not going anywhere. The moves seem to be just ways to get more talent on each team and get new contracts for both players that allow the teams to make the moves they want to make. And so both those guys are not expected to go anywhere and may end up with bigger paydays when all is said and done. Ole Miss has won the College World Series. The Rebels were the last team to make the field and got hot at the right time and swept Oklahoma in the finals. Ole Miss is the third straight SEC team to win college baseball's national title, and it is the first for its own program there at Ole Miss. The Yankees and Aaron Judge narrowly avoided salary arbitration on Friday just before they were set to go to the arbitration hearing. The star outfielder agreed to a $19 million contract for this season with incentives. I believe they're $250,000 in incentives for winning the AL MVP or the World Series MVP. Heading into arbitration, which again they never really got to, the Yankees proposed $17 million for the season. Judge wanted $21, and they settled right in the middle, which is a lot of what happens when you get to arbitration in these leagues. Some leagues also have it set up where the arbitrator has to pick one of the two numbers and cannot settle in the middle there, but I believe baseball is one of the ones that can settle for a different price than the two are proposing. Judge is having an unbelievable season, but the arbitration process ignores anything after the 2021 season. It's usually done in the off season, but because of the lockout and labor negotiations and the late spring training start and all that, it did not take place in the off season. And he will still be a free agent after the season, which has caused many people to start assuming that he may leave New York. There are also some key injuries in Major League Baseball. Marlins infielder Jazz Chisholm has been placed on the injured list with the lower back strain, despite rumors of some of his negative locker room behavior and stuff like that, and disagreements with teammates. Chisholm has been one of the best players for the Marlins this season, and that's definitely a bad break for them at this point. Phillies outfielder Bryce Harper had surgery to repair a broken thumb. The club is hopeful he can play again this season, but has no timetable for his return. Angels reliever Archie Bradley fractured his elbow during a brawl last weekend against the Mariners. The injury didn't happen in the brawl, but as he climbed over the railing of the dugout trying to join the brawl. 12 people have been suspended from that brawl, including Angels interim manager Phil Nevin, Angels pitcher Andrew Wantz, Mariners outfielder and DH Jesse Winker, Mariners outfielder Julio Rodriguez, and Mariners infielder J.P. Crawford. There is once again talk of MLB expansion, mostly stemming from a recent piece about Commissioner Rob Manfred on ESPN.com by Don Fanetta. In the piece, Manfred is asked about his reputation and many of the notable incidents and disagreements from his tenure, and he provides his outlook on the league under his watch, including his desire to get to 32 teams. In terms of MLB expansion, Nashville and Portland seem to be the main two cities that people mention, along with the possibility of returning to Montreal. They've also talked about Austin, San Antonio. I believe New Orleans was mentioned in there as well. Not in the article, but just as people speculate over where teams could be. Las Vegas has constantly talked about that, and all this talk of expansion comes on the heels of rumors that the Oakland A's may soon be relocating from Oakland to Las Vegas themselves. Current Dodgers first baseman and former Braves first baseman Freddie Freeman made an emotional return to Atlanta over last weekend and received his World Series ring. The weekend was so emotional that pitcher Clayton Kershaw voiced his concern over whether Freeman was fully committed to the Dodgers. It didn't help when Freeman reportedly fired his agent this morning, although there are some conflicting reports on that. And he put out a statement saying that things are fluid with his agent representation and they're trying to work things out. But according to Doug Gottlieb, who is more of a basketball reporter, so take it with a grain of salt, but he does cover for all sports on his show, Freeman's agent, Casey Close, received an offer from Atlanta that he knew Freddie would take, but did not present the offer to his client, which is a big violation by an agent. Doesn't matter how high profile the client is, and unfortunately this probably happens way more than it should and way more than we find out about. And like I said, it's a fireable offense no matter who you're representing. In terms of Freddie Freeman's commitment, I think he's committed to the Dodgers in the sense that he is committed to winning and playing great baseball, but he definitely would have liked to stay in Atlanta where he was the cornerstone player for so long and where he loved playing so much. In college basketball, former top recruit and basketball phenom Emoni Bates has announced his transfer from Memphis to Eastern Michigan. Bates initially committed to Michigan State, but decommitted to join Memphis and reclassified into the 2021 recruiting class. He was initially the top recruit in the 2022 recruiting class. As a 17-year-old at Memphis, he played in 18 games and averaged 9.7 points per game, which was a far cry below his expectations, especially when he's always described as a phenom. His transfer decision purportedly came down to Louisville in Eastern Michigan, but you have to wonder how interested any of the big schools, Louisville and whichever ones were reportedly in the running but didn't make the final cut, really were. Because to me it says a lot, and I might be stating the obvious here, it says a lot that he ended up at Eastern Michigan even though it is located in his hometown of Ypsilanti, Michigan, and he's a very talented kid on the court, and so teams should have been interested in him. But there also seems to be maturity and leadership concerns that need to be harnessed for him to reach his full potential, and that may have scared some teams away. The College Basketball Hall of Fame has also announced its new induction class for 2022. There are 9 members, including 5 coaches: John Beilein from Michigan and West Virginia, Roy Williams from Kansas and North Carolina, Jim Calhoun from UConn, Lon Kruger, who was most recently with Oklahoma. He's coached at a few other places that I forget, and Eastern Washington's Jerry Krause. The players joining the Hall of Fame will be Rip Hamilton, former Piston who played at UConn, Larry Miller, who played at North Carolina, Jimmy Walker from Providence, and Frank Selby from Furman. The induction date has not been set, but it is usually around mid to late November when there's a Hall of Fame Classic tournament going on in the Kansas City area. The Washington Commanders have extended Terry McLaurin, the wide receiver. He gets a 3-year, $71 million extension that makes him one of the 5 highest paid receivers in the NFL. And about 3/4 of that deal is guaranteed, just a little over 3/4. It was like 76.5%. Will take him through the 2025 season. McLaurin has been the team's best receiver since entering the league in 2019, and this deal prevents what appeared to be heading for a holdout through training camp. The league has also hired its first ever general manager of sports betting. David Heil will be in charge of advancing the league's reputation, growing the value of betting data, driving fan engagement, and protecting the integrity of the game from gambling-related harm. Moving to college now, the ACC was joining the movement to drop divisions in football. The conference has announced that it will eliminate divisions in 2023 and move to a scheduling format that has 3 permanent annual rivalry games for each team, with the other 5 conference opponents rotating on an every other year basis for a total of 8 conference games per year. The Big 12 has named former Rock Nation COO Brett Yormark as its new commissioner. Yormark replaces Bob Bowlesby, who previously announced his resignation back in April, I believe it was. Yormark gets a 5-year deal, and his term will start on August 1st. He has a background in sports licensing and sports agencies, but has little experience in the college sports, although that's nothing new and not a deal breaker. It makes him an interesting choice, but sometimes you need an outsider's point of view to really point out the problems and get down to changing things for the better. Well, I've decided to wait until we get more followers and listeners to bring back the Q&A segment that hadn't really gained any traction. But I will keep posting polls